Sedona, Arizona, June 19, 2013. A father and his son set out to explore the iconic Red Rock trails by bike and vanish without a trace. 10 years later, the wife, consumed by uncertainty, returns to the desert and unearths something that changes everything. What did she find beneath the burning sand? What secrets lie buried in those forgotten ruins? Emily closed her eyes for a moment and let the bitter scent of coffee flood her senses, trying to find some calm. Leaning against the kitchen counter, her fingers clutched a worn blue mug one she had once shared with Jack on better mornings. Since their separation 6 months ago, that house had become too big and far too silent. What had once been a refuge full of laughter now felt like a painful memory. Even though she knew she had made the right decision, she missed the little things desperately. The fresh cologne Jack left lingering in the bedroom, the carefree laughter of Lucas running barefoot down the hall. Now replaced by an empty echo, Emily glanced out the kitchen window. The morning sun was slowly rising over Sedona, painting the sky in deep orange and purple. She usually loved that view, but today something felt off, a strange, gnawing unease in her stomach. "Come on, don't be paranoid," she whispered, trying to convince herself. "It's just a bike ride. They'll be fine." At that exact moment, her phone vibrated with a message. Emily grabbed it, feeling a flicker of relief. It was from Jack. "Look how amazing this is. Lucas is so happy. We're good. We'll be back before sunset." Attached was a photo. Jack, with his usual guarded yet protective smile, and Lucas, beaming with joy, his bright pink helmet standing out against the desert landscape behind them. Both were waving at the camera, just like they always did on their little adventures. Emily smiled wistfully, brushing her fingers slowly across the screen. "We'll be back before sunset," echoed in her mind. She looked at the clock. Barely 9 a.m., still hours to go until sunset. Yet the unease in her chest refused to go away. Trying to distract herself, she headed into the studio and turned on the computer to look through some recent work photos. Since the separation, she had thrown herself into photography, trying to lose herself in the beauty of captured moments. But today, she couldn't focus. Her eyes kept drifting back to the phone. The hours dragged. The silence in the house seemed to thicken with each passing minute. By noon, Emily felt a tight knot of worry building. They should have sent another message by now, right? She muttered aloud, checking her phone again and again. No calls, no texts. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, Emily paced the living room. The soft scent of polished wood and the occasional creak of the floorboards beneath her feet were the only sounds amplifying her anxiety. She picked up the phone again and dialed Jack's number. It rang and rang before going to voicemail. She tried Lucas's phone, same result. Her worry was morphing into full-blown fear. "Jack, it's me. Please call me. I just want to make sure you're okay," she said, trying to keep the panic from leaking into her voice. Not minutes passed. Still nothing. The room felt like it was closing in. She stared out at the landscape, now bathed in golden sunset light, and she knew with absolute certainty that something was wrong. Without hesitating, Emily pulled up the number for the local police department and called Sedona Police Department. "Officer Clara Munoz speaking. How can I help you?" "My husband, ex-husband Jack Bennett, and my son Lucas went out biking this morning around the Red Rock area, and they haven't come back. They're not answering their phones. I know it might be early, but something's not right," Emily said, her voice cracking just slightly. "What time did they leave exactly?" The officer asked, calm but attentive. "Around 8, maybe. Jack sent me a photo around 9 saying they'd be back before sunset. There." was a brief pause on the other end. "All right, Ms. Harris. We'll send a patrol to check the starting area. Stay alert in case they return before us." After hanging up, Emily felt the walls of the house close in even tighter. She stared at her phone, waiting desperately for a call, a message, anything. Her mind started spiraling into the worst possible scenarios. An unstoppable wave of dread. Night eventually fell thick and heavy. Emily sat frozen by the front door, staring into the darkness, slowly swallowing the street. A sudden sound startled her. Flashing red and blue lights appeared outside her home. She opened the door quickly and saw a female officer approaching, accompanied by another. "Did you find something?" Emily asked, her voice trembling as she fought to stay composed. "We searched several bike trails in the Red Rock area," Officer Munoz explained. "We didn't find any signs yet, but we'll continue searching with more teams. Is there anything else we should know about them?" Emily paused, trying to gather her thoughts through the emotional fog. Jack always plans every outing in detail. He'd never take risks, especially not with Lucas. Something must have happened. "We'll do everything we can, Ms. Harris," the officer assured her. "We'll keep you updated through the night." Emily nodded, hugging herself as she watched. The officers returned to their patrol car. As she closed the door, a chilling emptiness settled in her chest. She climbed the stairs slowly and walked into Lucas's room. There, on the bed, was a small stuffed toy he used to hug every night. She picked it up and closed her eyes. The scent of the room, a mix of kids' cologne and laundry detergent, was comforting and painful all at once. "Please come home," she whispered into the stillness, clutching the toy to her chest. "I can't lose you too." The night crawled on. Emily remained curled on the living room couch, unable to sleep, her phone always within reach. Her mind swirled with images and possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. Just before dawn, as the soft morning light began to creep through the curtains, her phone rang suddenly. Emily sat up in a rush, heart pounding. "Jack?" she asked hopefully, though she knew it was an official number. "Miss Harris, this is Officer Munoz again. We found something near Red Rock." Emily felt her blood turn to ice. "Are they okay? Did you find them?" "Not exactly," Munoz replied cautiously. "We found clear bike tracks, recent ones, but they just stop. It's like they disappeared right there." "What do you mean?" Emily asked, stunned. "We're not sure yet. It's like father and son simply vanished into thin air. We'll keep investigating, but right now, there are no clear leads." As the call ended, Emily sank slowly onto the couch. The dim morning light stretched long, jagged shadows across the walls, an omen that her life was about to change forever. In that moment, she knew with absolute certainty her worst nightmare had only just begun. Emily stood in front of the old map pinned to the dining room wall, her eyes tracing the red ink lines she had drawn hundreds of times over the past 10 years. Her index finger slowly followed those familiar routes. The walls of the room were nearly covered in worn-out maps, faded photographs, and yellowing newspaper clippings with headlines like "The Mysterious Disappearance of Professor Bennett and His Son." The room felt heavy, thick with the stale scent of old paper and dry ink. The half-closed curtains let in just a sliver of light, casting faint shadows that blended into the permanent gloom that had followed Emily since that terrible day. In the 10 years since, she had become a shadow of the woman she once was. The spark that had once defined her had been buried in that desert, along with the two people she loved most. Every morning she awoke with the same foolish hope that she'd open her eyes and realize it had all been a nightmare. But each day she was met again by the brutal truth. The phone on the table rang abruptly, snapping her out of her trance. Yes? Emily answered, her voice rough. Emily, it's Officer Salazar, the man on the other end said with hesitation. We got your message, but like we've said before, if there's no new evidence, we can't reopen the search. Emily tightened her grip on the phone. You've never wanted to look past the obvious, she snapped. There's something out there. I know you missed something. Look, I understand how hard this is. I really do. But after all this time, maybe it's time to let go. To accept. Accept what, officer? She cut him off, her voice shaking but resolute. That they just disappeared into thin air? You have no idea what it's like to live with this kind of uncertainty. There was a long, tense silence on the other end. I'm sorry, Emily. We can't do more without solid evidence, he finally said before hanging up. Emily lowered the phone slowly and stared into space, the familiar ache in her chest burning again. She walked to the dining table, opened an old brown notebook, and began scribbling urgently. I dreamed of them again. I saw them walking toward a light. Lucas had his pink backpack, the same one he wore that day. The light was blinding. I know these dreams are real. I know they're trying to tell me something. Maybe if I go back one more time, I'll understand. She shut the notebook abruptly and grabbed her keys. She couldn't keep waiting. She had to go back to where it all began, even if it only led her back to the haunting silence of the desert. When she arrived at the exact location in the Sedona Desert where Jack and Lucas were last seen, Emily stepped slowly out of the car. The midday sun beat down mercilessly on her face, forcing her to close her eyes for a moment. The dry scent of sand, mixed with a faint metallic note, filled her lungs and brought a wave of painful memories. She scanned the familiar landscape: red sand, ancient rocks worn down by wind, dry shrubs like ghosts from the past. She began walking, inspecting every inch of the ground with the same painstaking care she'd always had. Over the years, she had memorized every curve, every stone, but she kept hoping something, anything, would finally break the silence. Then something caught the light, a faint shimmer. Rushing toward it, she dropped to her knees and began digging anxiously. Her fingers sank into the warm sand until they hit something solid. With trembling hands, she slowly pulled out a torn piece of faded pink fabric, stained and dirtied by time. Emily felt the air leave her lungs. Lucas's backpack, she whispered, her voice cracking as tears filled her eyes, drying instantly against her sun-scorched cheeks. They were here. Right here. She stayed there for a long time, kneeling in the hot sand, clutching that scrap of fabric, her heart pounding in her chest. By sunset, she returned home, carefully wrapping the cloth. She knew this was a sign, a key piece of evidence. The authorities could no longer ignore. The next morning, Emily arrived early at the local police station, carrying the fragment she had found. As soon as she walked in, the uneasy stares of the officers met her. Emily. Again? Officer Salazar asked, clearly uncomfortable at the sight of her. I found something in the desert, she said, handing him the piece of pink fabric. It's part of Lucas's backpack. This proves something happened out there. Salazar took the cloth with a serious expression, examining it for a moment, hesitating. Emily, this isn't enough to officially reopen the case. It could have been buried out there for years. Don't. You see? This proves you missed something. There has to be more out there. We can't operate based on speculation, Salazar replied sharply. I know this is hard, but you have to let it go. The room went quiet. The other officer's eyes said everything. To them, Emily had simply lost her mind. Emily's blood boiled. She snatched the fabric back and stormed out of the station. The frustration she had bottled up for years was now transforming into a quiet but unstoppable force. Back at home, she laid the fabric on the table and sat slowly in front of the map. Her eyes wandered to the smiling faces of Jack and Lucas in the photo Jack had sent her that morning. 10 years ago. "I'm not giving up on you," she said aloud, her voice steady and full of new resolve. "No matter how long it's been. I know you're out there. I know you're waiting for me." Her eyes swept across all the maps, the diary notes, the clues and dreams she had documented so meticulously over the years. "If the police won't help me, I'll find someone who will," she whispered with certainty. Emily quickly turned on her computer and began writing a direct, urgent message explaining the full story, attaching photos and journal fragments. She joined local volunteer groups online, knowing there were still people who remembered the case. "My husband Jack Bennett and my son Lucas disappeared 10 years ago in the Sedona Desert. The authorities have stopped looking, but I know there are still clues out there. I need volunteers, people willing to search with me. If you can help, please join me. I will not stop until I find them." She sent the message and sat in silence, watching the screen with hope. Her heart raced. She knew she had just made a decision that would change her life forever. Emily walked slowly toward the window. Night had fallen, and the shadows outside stretched across the empty street. In her mind, Jack and Lucas's faces smiled back at her, giving her the strength to keep going. She looked at the piece of the backpack on the table and knew, with absolute certainty, that there was no turning back. The time for silence and waiting was over. No matter how long it took, she would find the truth, because even though the authorities and the world had moved on, Emily knew deep in her soul that her loved ones were still out there, waiting to be found, and she would not stop until she brought them home. Emily moved slowly across the dry, reddish sand of the desert, feeling the watchful eyes of the volunteers walking beside her. The morning was covered in a thick layer of gray clouds, making the daylight feel cold and unsettling, despite the usual scorching heat of Sedona. She had gathered a small but determined group. People from the community who, while initially skeptical of her theories, respected her persistence and admired her courage. Among them was Sarah, a young college student with short blonde hair, and Tom, a sturdy man who worked as a park ranger. Along with a few other neighbors, they were few in number, but each seemed genuinely committed to finding answers. "Check carefully," Emily said, trying to steady the tremble in her voice. "Look for anything that might seem insignificant. Personal items, fabric, scraps of metal. Anything could be important." "Got it," Tom replied calmly but firmly. "We'll find them." As they moved forward, Emily's heart pounded. This time felt different, stronger, more urgent. She hadn't slept the night before, poring over maps, notes, and dreams written in her journal. Now she felt like something was finally on the verge of being revealed. Hours passed as they combed through the desert terrain. Each group covered an area, examining every inch of land Emily had marked. "Over here," Sarah suddenly shouted, making Emily run toward her, heart racing. When she arrived, Emily saw Sarah pointing to a spot near a wind-eroded rock. A rusted object stuck out of the earth, partially buried in reddish soil. She dropped to her knees, instantly digging frantically with her hands, desperate to uncover what was hidden beneath the sand. The rough feel of rusted metal was immediately familiar. She kept digging, her fingers scraping and bleeding from the effort, but she felt no pain, only hope. At last, the sand gave way, revealing a tubular blue frame. Emily froze, breath caught in her throat. Her eyes welled with tears as she recognized Jack's blue bicycle. It was completely rusted, the wheels warped, the seat torn from years under brutal sun and wind. "No, it can't be," Emily whispered, voice breaking. As she dug further, another metallic glint appeared, this one a faded shade of pink. Her heart flipped as she slowly uncovered Lucas's bike. The once bright pink frame was now dull and bleached by time. Emily knelt in silence, staring at the ruined bicycles, trying to comprehend what this meant. Time seemed to stop. She could hear only her own breath and the hushed awe of the volunteers around her. What happened to them here? Sarah said softly, staring wide-eyed at the discovery. Emily didn't answer. She couldn't. Her mind was a whirlwind of memories, fears, and theories. She saw Jack and Lucas in her mind, their smiling faces from that last photo now clashing with some unknown and terrifying reality. There must be more, Tom muttered, breaking the silence. "Let's keep looking nearby. We might find something else." Emily nodded slowly. She couldn't stop now. The discovery had reignited a fierce determination inside her. She knew more answers were close. They continued inspecting the area. Emily checked every inch of ground with obsessive care. Minutes later, something else caught her attention, a worn brown cloth peeking from between two nearby stones. She rushed over and carefully began to pull it free. A knot formed in her stomach as she realized the Pinko backpack belonged to Lucas. She recognized the faded brown fabric and the little decorations on the straps. In that moment, emotion and fear swept over her. "His backpack," she whispered, her voice breaking. She leaned down and instinctively smelled the fabric. It still held the faint scent of soap and children's cologne, a subtle mix that pulled her instantly back in time, back to the warmth of her son's embrace. With trembling hands, Emily slowly unzipped the backpack. Inside was nothing but sand, fragments of dry leaves, and a small bundle wrapped in plastic. Her heart skipped a beat at the sight of its dark blue cover and worn edges. It was Jack's journal. Carefully, she removed it from the plastic. The pages were yellowed, some nearly unreadable, but still held Jack's unmistakable handwriting. She stepped away from the group, seeking a moment of privacy, and sat on a nearby rock. The dry breeze brushed her face as she began to read. June 7. I'm trying to stay calm for Lucas, but something strange is happening here. Last night, I saw those lights again over the mountain. They're fast, bright, too precise to be reflections. I try to ignore it, but I can't shake the feeling we're being watched. Emily's hands shook more as she turned the page. June 8. I've seen figures moving around our campsite. I could swear someone is following us. I tried to approach, but they disappeared quickly. Maybe it's the heat messing with my head, but I can't shake this paranoia. For the first time in years, I'm really afraid. Each word felt like a fresh wound. Emily's heart pounded as she imagined Jack writing those lines, scared, isolated, trying to protect their son. June 9th. Lucas told me he felt someone touch his shoulder last night. I'm trying to keep him calm, but I'm starting to believe we're not alone out here. I've decided we have to move. Today I saw something even stranger, a group of dark figures near the abandoned military complex to the north. I'll try to get as far from there as possible tomorrow. Emily looked up slowly from the journal, eyes scanning the barren, silent horizon. Her mind raced with questions. What were those lights? Who were those figures? Was Jack paranoid? Or had he discovered something real and dangerous? She closed the journal slowly, breathing deeply, feeling the weight of mystery growing heavier. She knew she had to act now. Standing firmly, she returned to the group. I found something important, she said with new strength in her voice. We need to report this to the authorities immediately." Hours later, Emily stepped once again into the police station, carrying Jack's journal like sacred evidence. After explaining everything to Officer Salazar, he simply shook his head. Scanning the aged pages with skepticism, "Emily, these notes sound like delusions brought on by heat exhaustion and dehydration. Strange lights, shadowy figures. We can't take this seriously. It's real. Jack wouldn't lie about something like this. You have to check the abandoned complex. I know there's something there," she said, her voice urgent. "We don't have the resources to chase theories without solid grounds," Salazar replied, handing back the journal. "I'm sorry." Emily left the station fuming, filled with rage and frustration at the indifference. Back home, she felt her determination solidify. She now understood that the search for truth rested solely on her shoulders. That night, beneath the soft glow of a desk lamp, she reviewed the journal again. Her eyes lingered on one phrase, "abandoned military complex." Something inside her clicked. Maybe the answers she had searched for over a decade were hidden in that forgotten place. She took a deep breath, making a firm decision. If the authorities wouldn't help her, she would investigate on her own. From that moment on, she would search tirelessly in that abandoned complex. It was time to face the secrets the desert had kept buried for 10 years. Emily stepped into the local library early in the morning, clutching Jack's journal tightly to her chest. The small, old-fashioned building carried the scent of aging paper and worn wood. She walked quickly toward the historical archives section, tucked away in the quietest and least visited part of the library. She needed clear answers, and she was determined to find them. Sitting at a dusty table, she carefully opened the journal to the page where Jack had mentioned the abandoned military complex. Her fingers slid slowly over the faded handwriting, a painful mix of sorrow and hope swelling in her chest. She knew this was the key, the missing link to uncover the truth of what had happened that fateful morning in the desert. "Please, Jack, tell me what really happened," she whispered softly to herself as she began to sift through the historical documents. After hours of digging through old records, Emily began to notice a disturbing pattern. Yellowed newspapers reported unexplained disappearances dating back to the late 1970s. It began with solo hikers, then entire families all vanishing near the same remote area north of Sedona, close to the abandoned military complex. One article briefly mentioned that authorities had quickly closed those cases, labeling them as accidents caused by the harsh desert conditions. But there was something suspicious about how fast those files were archived, never allowing for deeper investigation. Why did no one keep looking into this? Emily muttered, her heart pounding as a chill ran down her spine. She had just read about a family that vanished 20 years ago, leaving behind only bicycles and backpacks just like Jack and Lucas. She took photos of the articles with her phone and rushed out of the library. Her mind was a storm of questions and suspicion. She needed to see the abandoned complex for herself. She needed to know if the clues matched Jack's descriptions. Hours later, Emily drove to the edge of town, following the little-used highway that led straight to the place mentioned in the articles. The road was lonely, flanked by dry desert landscapes. The setting sun cast a golden glow over everything. She stopped at a rusted, collapsed fence and stared at the distant ruins of the complex. The facility looked deserted, its structures weathered by decades of neglect. The corroded remains of an old antenna rose like a metal skeleton against the red twilight sky. Emily grabbed her camera and began walking toward the site, carefully pushing through thorny brush and unstable ground. As she approached, she noticed fresh tire marks in the dust, far too recent to be a coincidence. No way. Someone's been here recently, she thought, her pulse quickening. Jack was right. This place isn't truly abandoned. She cautiously approached a broken window in one of the buildings. Holding her breath, she peeked inside. There were dust-covered tables, old files scattered across the floor, but among the grime, she could see fresh boot prints. Her heart thundered. Who had been here? What were they looking for in a place supposedly untouched for decades? She walked around the building and crouched low. Nearby, she found recent litter, empty water bottles, food wrappers, fresh cigarette butts. Clear signs of human activity, recent human activity. Fear tightened inside her, but she knew she couldn't stop now. For the first time in years, she was close to something real, something that could explain Jack and Lucas's disappearance. Emily decided to wait until nightfall, hiding behind some nearby bushes, her camera ready in hand. Time passed slowly as the sun vanished and stars began to fill the sky. Around midnight, as she fought off fatigue, something caught her eye. Bright, fast-moving lights in the distance, just like the ones Jack had described in his journal. Her breath quickened as she watched the phenomenon. The lights hovered briefly near the complex and then vanished in the blink of an eye. As she tried to process what she'd just witnessed, she heard something behind her, soft, steady footsteps. On the dry ground, Emily froze, holding her breath. Her entire body tensed, desperate to stay silent and undetected. A shadow moved nearby, scanning the area cautiously. Cold fear gripped her spine as the figure stood in place, unmoving. Minutes passed like hours before it finally turned and walked away, heading back toward the building. Emily exhaled slowly, her body trembling uncontrollably. She knew she had to leave immediately, but just then, she heard the low rumble of an engine, peeking out just enough to remain hidden. She watched as a black vehicle with no visible plates rolled slowly out from behind the building. Emily acted fast, raising her camera and snapping several clear photos as the vehicle pulled away. Just as she took the last picture, the car suddenly slammed to a stop. Her heart leapt into her throat. She ducked back into the bushes, barely breathing. The taillights glowed bright red in the darkness, motionless, as if the driver had noticed something out of place. Seconds passed like centuries. Emily felt a crushing pressure in her chest. Her thoughts raced wildly. Did they see me? Do they know I'm here? What will they do if they find me? Finally, after what felt like forever, the vehicle started again and disappeared into the distance, leaving only dust and darkness behind. Emily remained hidden, frozen in fear and adrenaline. When she finally managed to stand, her legs were shaking violently. She hurried back to her car, constantly checking her surroundings, nerves on edge. Once inside, she locked the doors and drove away from the abandoned complex as fast as she could. The entire drive home, her heart thumped like a drum. She knew she had found something important, but she also knew she had crossed a dangerous line. Whoever these people were, they were clearly determined to keep something hidden. Once home, Emily rushed inside, locking every door and window. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves, and connected her camera to the computer. The photos showed everything clearly. The mysterious vehicle emerging from the military complex. She studied each image carefully, wondering who could be behind it all. Were they the same people Jack had mentioned in his journal? Were they responsible for what happened to him and Lucas? Emily realized in that moment there was no going back. She was on the brink of uncovering a secret far more dangerous and far deeper than she had ever imagined. As she sat in front of the glowing computer screen, a soft sound echoed outside the window. She stood immediately, moving to the curtain cautiously. The street looked quiet, but something inside her knew she was no longer safe. Her instincts told her she had crossed a point of no return. From now on, she would have to move carefully because whoever was behind this, they now knew someone had discovered their darkest secrets. The room was wrapped in a thick silence, broken only by the steady rhythm of the keyboard. Emily had been sitting in front of her computer for hours, carefully reviewing every photo she had taken the night before. The screen cast a soft glow. On her tired, determined face, she had managed to capture clear images of the suspicious vehicle leaving the abandoned complex. But she needed something more, something she could track. Finally, in one of the shots, she spotted a partial view of the license plate on the dark car that had unsettled her so deeply. Her heart pounding, she quickly entered the information into the public vehicle registration database. She had access to. Emily held her breath as the system slowly loaded. When the results appeared, a chill ran down her spine. The vehicle was registered to a company called Desert Tech Logistics, a local corporation supposedly involved in private transportation and logistics. With trembling hands, she searched for more information. As she dug through public records and databases, a growing sense of alarm began to rise in her chest. The company was indirectly tied to several influential figures in Sedona: politicians, prominent business owners, even a few high-ranking local officials. Emily felt the air escape from her lungs as the pieces slowly came together. This couldn't be a coincidence. Why would a company with such powerful connections be operating around a supposedly abandoned military facility? Her head throbbed, but she couldn't stop. She had to keep going. The hours flew by, and by nightfall, her desk was covered with scribbled notes and scattered documents. Everything pointed toward a web of influence and corruption that led straight to the old complex. "This is way bigger than I thought," she whispered to herself, feeling the crushing weight of her discovery settle on her shoulders. She knew she had to move quickly and carefully. One wrong step could put her in real danger. But she couldn't wait any longer. She needed answers. That night, she decided to return to the complex, this time prepared with a strong flashlight, basic tools, and a small digital camera to document anything important. She arrived at the site under the cover of midnight, parking her car at a safe distance to avoid detection. Moving through dry brush and the shadows of crumbling buildings, she crept toward the ruins. The cold night air felt even heavier here. She moved slowly and cautiously, following signs of recent human activity she had seen before. A rusted metal door caught her attention. It was slightly ajar, a faint light glowing from within. Heart pounding. Emily approached and stepped inside. Ahead of her was a stairway descending underground. Her breath grew shallow as she slowly made her way down, each step echoing beneath her feet. At the bottom, she found a long, narrow hallway dimly lit by a flickering overhead bulb. Tension hung thick in the air as she made her way down the corridor to a room at the end. What she saw took her breath away. It was an old monitoring room, dust-covered equipment, cracked screens, and a wall lined with corroded metal shelves stacked with VHS tapes. Emily began scanning the tapes quickly, searching for anything dated around the time of Jack and Lucas's disappearance. After several frantic minutes, she found one with a precise date, just days after they vanished. Taking a deep breath, she struggled to power on the ancient VHS player. The screen flickered, revealing grainy black and white footage. Her heart nearly stopped as she saw what appeared to be a group of prisoners being moved through hallways just like the one she had just walked. The faces were blurry, unrecognizable, but clearly these were people being led against their will. Emily's stomach turned as she watched. The footage was brief, abruptly cut, and didn't show Jack or Lucas clearly, but the very existence of these recordings was terrifying. Suddenly, She heard footsteps approaching from the hall. She shut off the player instantly and ducked behind a metal cabinet, holding her breath as the door creaked open. A tall man in black entered the room, a flashlight in hand. He scanned the space suspiciously. "Who's in here?" he asked, his voice deep and threatening. Emily remained absolutely still, her heartbeat crashing in her chest. The man moved slowly through the room, inching closer to where she was hiding. When he was close enough, Emily acted. With every ounce of strength she had, she shoved the cabinet forward. It toppled with a loud crash, blocking the man momentarily. Without looking back, Emily sprinted for the door and raced up the stairs. Her lungs burned as she emerged into the open night air, but she didn't stop. She ran across the rugged terrain, hearing the guards' heavy footsteps trailing behind her. Finally, she ducked behind a pile of debris and stayed perfectly still as the guard searched the area, furious and confused. After several agonizing minutes, the man gave up and walked off toward another part of the complex. Emily exhaled, trying to slow her racing heart. Then something caught her eye just above her on a nearby wall. She stepped closer, shining her flashlight on a series of faded scratches in the concrete, and as she leaned in, tears filled her eyes. There, etched in rushed, uneven handwriting, was a message she recognized instantly. It was Jack's handwriting. "Emily, if you ever find this, it means you were right. Lucas and I were here. We're being held in this place. Never stop looking for us." Emily felt 10 years of uncertainty crash over her in a single wave. She reached out and touched the inscription, feeling as if she were touching Jack's hand. The words were the ultimate proof she had spent a decade searching for. Now she knew without doubt Jack and Lucas had been victims of something real, something terrifying, something deliberate. She couldn't give up. She had to act fast. She had to gather enough evidence and confront those responsible. As the night closed in around her, Emily slowly backed away from the wall and returned to her car, knowing that what she had just uncovered changed everything. She realized with piercing clarity that she was tangled in something dangerous and powerful, but now she had the truth and the strength to keep going. She looked back once more at the dark, looming complex, Jack's words forever etched in her heart. "I will find you," she whispered with absolute resolve, before disappearing into the darkness of the night. The sun was just beginning to rise over the horizon as Emily parked outside the state police headquarters in Phoenix. Her heart pounded as she held a folder tightly against her chest, filled with photographs, documents, and a carefully copied version of the message Jack had carved into the wall of the complex. She entered the building with steady steps, though every movement carried the weight of fear and uncertainty. She walked straight to the main desk, where a surprised officer looked up at her. "Good morning. I need to speak immediately with whoever is in charge of special investigations," Emily said firmly. The officer scanned her tired eyes and unwavering determination before making a quick call. Within minutes, a tall, serious man in a dark suit and with a sharp, analytical gaze approached her. "I'm Special Agent Rivera," he said in a professional tone. "How can I help you?" Emily extended the folder to him with trembling but steady hands. "Inside are all the pieces of evidence I've collected about the disappearance of my husband and son 10 years ago in Sedona. The local authorities have ignored this, but I believe they're part of something much bigger." Rivera studied her for a moment, then took the folder. "Please, follow me to my office." Once inside, Emily explained everything in detail, each photo of the suspicious vehicle, the records connecting the complex to powerful individuals, the disturbing tapes showing possible prisoners, and finally, the desperate message carved by Jack. Rivera reviewed every document slowly, his expression unreadable. and grave. Then he looked up at her directly. "Emily, this is very serious, but I need to ask you a few questions to understand it better." Emily nodded, mentally preparing for what was coming. The following hours were intense. She faced a thorough interrogation, rapid, detailed questions that tested every part of her. Investigation. Rivera examined each point with caution, probing for inconsistencies or weaknesses. "Are you absolutely sure this isn't your mind, trying to create answers after so many years of not knowing?" he asked, watching her closely. Emily clenched her hands, locking eyes with him. "I've asked myself that question every night for 10 years. I've doubted my own sanity. But this evidence is real. I know something terrible happened out there. Jack left that message for a reason. I need you to believe me." A heavy silence fell across the office. Finally, Rivera sighed and stood up slowly. "All right, Emily. I'm taking this to my commanding officer. We'll launch an immediate investigation and send a special unit to Sedona tonight." A wave of relief surged through her chest. For the first time in years, someone was finally taking her seriously. That night, as darkness fell, a convoy of official vehicles sped toward the abandoned complex. Emily rode in silence in the back of one of the patrol cars, watching the nighttime desert pass by through the window. The flashing lights pierced the darkness as they advanced in a journey that felt endless. When they arrived, the operation began immediately. Armed officers in bulletproof vests surrounded the complex with extreme caution. Emily felt the tension rise inside her as she walked alongside Rivera toward the facility. Inside, everything was dark, and still yet clear signs showed someone had been there recently. Furniture had been hastily moved. Documents were partially burned. There were signs of a recent fire, an attempt to destroy evidence. Emily moved slowly through the ruins, eyes scanning each empty room, each abandoned corner. The hope that had carried her here began to blur with fear and frustration. "Looks like they knew we were coming," Rivera said grimly. "Everything's been cleared out very recently." Tears began to sting Emily's eyes. "So there's nothing we can do? Are we too late again?" Rivera stepped closer, his tone more gentle. "We'll keep investigating. Something this big can't stay hidden forever. But for now, we have to accept that they're not here." Emily wandered into a small side room, trying to control her growing despair. Her gaze swept the walls slowly, searching for anything the others might have missed. Suddenly, in a dark corner, something caught her eye. A faint glint. She moved toward it, knelt down, and gently lifted a rotting piece of wood. Her breath caught in her throat. There, covered in dust and lightly rusted, lay a small silver pendant in the shape of a star. It was the one Lucas had always worn as a child, a gift she had given him on his 10th birthday. She picked it up, holding it between her fingers as tears rolled down her cheeks. "Lucas was here," she whispered, barely audible. "He was here recently." Rivera stepped closer, studying the pendant with a serious expression. "Are you sure it's his?" "Yes, I gave it to him before all this began." "He never took it off," Emily said, her voice shaking as a new wave of hope rose within her. "He was here." "I know it." Rivera nodded slowly, understanding the weight of what she had just found. "This changes everything. We'll begin tracking immediately. We'll do whatever it takes to find him." Emily clutched the pendant to her chest, feeling its warmth bring a flicker of comfort in the middle of her pain and uncertainty. She knew now there was still hope. After the officers finished their detailed sweep of the area, Emily stayed behind a few more moments. She stood alone in the ruined complex, staring at the shadows cast on the walls, imagining everything Jack and Lucas must have endured there. She looked again at Jack's message on the Wall, remembering his final plea, "Never stop looking for us." "I won't stop," Emily whispered with renewed determination. "I will find you, no matter what." As she finally stepped out of the complex, the cold night air brushed gently against her skin as if trying to soothe her anguish. She climbed into the patrol vehicle, staring down at the pendant in her hand as they drove away. She knew the road ahead would still be long, but now she was certain Jack and Lucas had been alive much longer than anyone had imagined. And that truth gave her the strength to keep going, no matter how painful or dangerous the path might be. As they drove through the night, Emily pressed the pendant firmly against her heart, eyes fixed on the darkness outside. Inside her, the fire was stronger than ever. This proof was the final push she needed to keep fighting, to never give up until she brought them home. She now understood her search was far from over. The complex had hidden dark, twisted secrets for decades, but she was determined to expose the truth, no matter how deep it ran, because in that truth lay the only hope of ever seeing them again. Jack and Lucas were still out there, waiting to be rescued, and Emily would never stop searching until they were home again. The soft light of dawn bathed the police convoy as it made its way toward a remote village hidden deep within the arid landscape near Sedona. Emily sat in silence, staring at Lucas's silver pendant clutched tightly in her hand, feeling anxiety course through every part of her body. In the past few hours, new testimony from local witnesses had led investigators to this forgotten village. They spoke of strange activity, people moving at night, unusual lights. To Emily, every word had felt like a clear sign sent by fate. When they arrived, the state police moved quickly. The village was little more than a scattered cluster of rundown houses, many abandoned, others inhabited by people who watched the newcomers with fearful, suspicious eyes. Emily stepped out of the vehicle beside Agent Rivera, a growing knot in her stomach. They moved through narrow, dusty paths and dilapidated homes, asking the locals if they had seen Jack or Lucas. At first, they were met only with tense silence and hesitant stares. Finally, an elderly woman with sad eyes stepped forward, trembling slightly. "I've seen a man, thin, tired eyes. They've been keeping him in the last house in the village," she whispered, glancing around nervously. "Please, help him." Emily felt her heart stop for a moment. They followed the woman to the house she had pointed out. Officers moved in quickly, opening doors and sweeping through dark rooms. Emily waited outside, pressing the pendant tightly against her chest, her breath shallow. Suddenly, from inside, she heard a weak voice, faint but unmistakably familiar. "Emily?" Tears welled in her eyes as she rushed in. There, sitting on an old chair, frail and gaunt, with eyes that held years of pain, was Jack. Jack. Emily whispered, dropping to her knees beside him, taking his hands, feeling as though time itself had stopped. "I'm here. I found you." Jack slowly looked up. There was fear in his eyes and pain, but also deep relief. "I knew you'd come. I never stopped believing," he said in a trembling voice, trying to smile. "But Lucas escaped a few days ago. He's out there in the desert. I tried to find him, but I couldn't. He's still out there, Emily. We have to find him." Emily felt a surge of hope and dread all at once. She immediately informed Rivera of what had happened. A new search began at once with helicopters, K-9 units, and dozens of local volunteers. The hours that followed were tense. The desert's dry, shifting terrain made the search harder, masking any signs. Driven by instinct, Emily veered off slightly from the main group, following a rocky path that seemed long abandoned. As she moved slowly, something pulled her toward a cluster of distant boulders. Her heart beat wildly with a strange, unshakable certainty. As she got closer, she spotted fresh tracks, barefoot prints, clear signs of recent human presence. Lucas. She whispered, quickening her pace. Finally, behind a rock formation, she found a small natural cavity hidden by dry shrubs. There, curled up, hiding and visibly weakened, was Lucas, now a young man, with long hair and a face worn by years of isolation and suffering. At first, he recoiled in fear. But then, in his tired eyes, recognition emerged. "Mom?" he asked, voice trembling and full of disbelief. "I'm here, sweetheart," Emily said softly, approaching slowly, each step feeling like a miracle. "It's over. You're safe now." The embrace was long and overflowing with emotions held in for years. Mother and son clung to each other desperately, letting tears speak what words could not, silently rebuilding the bond that had been stolen from them. Hours later, the reunion had already made national headlines. Emily, Jack, and Lucas were finally together again, under police protection, as cameras captured every moment of the reunion. During an impromptu press conference, Emily bravely shared the truth with the world about the hidden network, the illegal experiments, and the years Jack and Lucas had endured in captivity. The revelation shocked the country, sparking a national outcry. After the media storm, the family finally returned home to Sedona. When they stepped back into the house that had held so many painful memories, Emily felt life slowly beginning to return to its walls. In the weeks that followed, they worked to rebuild their family. The nights were often difficult, filled with painful memories and deep scars that would take time to heal. Jack and Lucas slowly opened up, sharing fragments of what they had endured, walking the long path to emotional recovery. One quiet afternoon, while Emily sorted through old family photos, her cell phone rang. She answered, and on the other end, a distorted voice spoke, impossible to identify. "Emily Harris, listen carefully. Your husband Jack hasn't told you everything. He knows more than he says. This is much bigger than you think." Emily froze. She tried to respond, but the call ended abruptly, leaving her in deep, uneasy silence. She looked toward the living room where Jack and Lucas sat talking peacefully, unaware of the call she had just received. A new question began to echo in her mind, haunting and profound. What was really behind all of this? What had Jack left out in order to protect them? Emily took a deep breath, knowing that even though they had recovered what mattered most, there were still unanswered questions, secrets yet to surface. For now, she chose to keep the call to herself. They needed time to heal and rebuild trust. But deep down, she knew the search for truth wasn't over. She walked slowly over to Jack and Lucas, sitting beside them, feeling the warmth of their presence surround her like a gentle blanket. "Everything okay?" Jack asked, noticing her expression. Emily smiled softly and nodded. "Yeah, I was just thinking, we still have a long road ahead. But as long as we're together, we can face anything." Jack gently squeezed her hand, and Lucas leaned in to hug her. For now, they were safe, together again, and slowly reclaiming what had been stolen from them. The future finally felt possible again. But Emily knew, deep in her heart, that the call had opened a new door, new layer to a conspiracy that had yet to be uncovered. Sooner or later, she would have to face what Jack was still hiding, but that would come later. Now was the time to heal, to reconnect, to be a family again. And even if the shadows of the past still lingered silently, she believed that as long as they were together, they had the strength to face them. After all, hope had finally been rescued, and for now, that was enough.